Hey everybody, it's Jason from the Texas Gun Vault, and once again I'm coming to you with another range report. And today's range report is on another awesome and really cool SIG pistol. We're taking a look at the SIG P220, and this is going to be an early example because it has a couple of very unique features that maybe some of you guys can tell already from just looking at the profile here. And we're going to talk about all those features. This is made in West Germany. So yes, before the reunification of Germany. Now, the P220 started off as the P75. It replaced the P210 in Swiss service, and originally these were chambered in 9mm. But when they started making them for civilians, they chambered them in 45 to bring into the United States, because at that time 45 was definitely way more popular than 9mm, and all that has to do with is the 1911. You guys know how popular the 1911 is, and this is a gun that I think was trying to kind of compete with it. It's single stack 45, full size, with military provenance. And so it's really cool to have one of these here to review. Now, I actually own two very similar SIG P220s in a very similar configuration. I'm going to show you those in just a moment. But before I do and talk about the things I like and don't like about this pistol, as always, I want to thank the people that make these videos possible. First and foremost is the owner of this awesome pistol, who recently found it as a great gun store find. That is my good friend and local subscriber, Jack. Jack, thank you so much once again. I want to thank my Patreons as always, because through their monthly donation and support, they help me keep this content coming. And as always, I want to thank my primary sponsor, who always provides all of the ammunition, my good friend Mark from Brownworks. And yes, I am here to thank my sponsor, Brownworks. What an amazing grip company. If you are in the market for high quality and fine wood grips that can be customized and tailored to your certain specifications, you need to go and check out Brownworks. I'm going to put a link in the description below, as well as a coupon code for 10% off your first order. But if you don't know about Brownworks, they are a custom grip manufacturing company. He can make grips for all different types of firearms, from 1911s, Beretta 92, CZ75s, and even SIGs. He can put on custom logos, custom engravings. He can finish the grips in a number of different ways and finishes and textures. Anything that you can imagine, Mark can make. So as I mentioned, I'm going to put a link in the description below. Go over there and see what he has to offer. I know that you guys will be really impressed with everything that he can make, and anything you can imagine, I guarantee you he can hook you up with. So please go over there, check out his website. If you don't find what you're looking for, please contact Mark. And when you do, thank him for supporting the Texas Gun Vault, and tell him that Jason from the Texas Gun Vault sent you. All right, so let's talk about this pistol and what makes it so special. Because yes, SIG still makes the P220 chambered in 45, but this is an early example. So let's go over a couple of the features that make this kind of special. First, you might notice this one has a heel release to the magazine. There is no button here on the side. The original 220s, or the P75s, had a heel release. That was part of the Swiss contract and just what they were kind of used to. So to have one before they switched to the button release tells me it's before about 1980 or 1981. Another thing that's really cool about this pistol is that the slide is made from stamped sheet metal. Now, most people don't know this, but SIG has kind of two eras when it comes to the P series of pistols. The ones that are made from bar stock, well, the slide made from bar stock steel, and today stainless steel, and the ones that were made of stamped sheet metal. It's really easy to tell which ones are made of stamped sheet metal because they all have this flat surface here on the top of the slide. That's just part of the machining process. Now, you're probably wondering, how in the world can that be stamped sheet metal? Well, when they stamp that sheet metal, everything is there except for the front of the pistol. So this whole nose part of the slide is actually welded on, and that's after the fact. Another reason you can tell this is a stamped sheet metal slide is we have the breech block right here, and it is held in place by this roll pin. So I believe they continued this manufacturing process into the mid-1990s in Germany, but when SIG opened up their factory here in the US and began making pistols, they already started making them out of just bar stock stainless steel, which at the original introduction of the pistol was a more complicated process, but with today's CNC machinery, it's actually easier. Now there's a debate that continues to this day on which one is better, and of course people that like old stuff and think the old ways are the best are always going to tell you these guns shoot better, have better recoil, and are more accurate. Is that the case? Well, I've shot a number of both, and for me they shoot about the same. For me it's more of a cool factor to see how they used to make them and to have one here on the workbench that was made in the original way. So that is just something that is really cool. Another thing that you can tell from the old from the new with is the hammer. So here is one of the older hammers. As you can see, it looks a little bit small, a little bit more pointed. Now, I brought out two of my P220s, and I'll talk about these in just a moment, but here is more of a modern hammer, and you can see how that is just a little bit bigger and shaped just a little bit different. So that's a very small difference. And of course you have the grips. Now the grips are very different because it does not have that magazine release on the side. So here is the 220 that we are reviewing today, and here is the other 220 that has the button release right there. Now before we go into talking about this pistol and things I like and don't like, I want to show you two of mine that are really cool, and both of these are unfired. I know some of you guys are going to make fun of me because I have guns in my collection that I don't fire, but I have a reason why. Both of these are great gun store finds, and I was really glad to pick this one up because I didn't really understand what I had when I bought it. But this one was made in 1977, which was the first year that these were imported to the United States, and they weren't even imported by SIG at the time. This one is imported by Haas Firearms Company of Los Angeles, California. So this is a very low serial numbered, unfired example of a P220 chambered in 45. And the other one that I own is actually one of the last that were made in Germany. Now this one is not made in West Germany. This one was made after the reunification. And from my understanding of tracking down the serial number range with this gun, this was actually part of some type of police contract, and it was one of the last made before they either closed the factory or changed the manufacturing techniques in Germany. And by the time this one was made, I believe this one was made in the mid to late 90s, they already had SIG 220s with accessory rails and so forth. But this one was made in the older configuration. It just has the magazine release on the side. So I have one of the first 220s ever imported to the United States in 45, and one of the last. Now this one wasn't even imported by SIG, even though it does have the SIG Arms Exeter, New Hampshire mark. This one was imported by PW Arms of Redmond, Washington. So both of my 220s were not imported by SIG. Now the one we have on the table today does say it was assembled by RPS. So I'm going to show you that right there. So this one was not imported by SIG either. Now, some of the early 220s were also imported by Browning, and they were called the Browning BDA, or the Browning Double Action. A feature that many of them had was a polished finish on the slide. These have kind of the older nitride. I'm not really sure what the finish actually was called in this time, but it looks like it has held up great, especially for a gun that's about 40 years old. So really interesting to have here on the table. So another thing too about these stamped sheet metal slides, and I know I'm going into a lot of history and probably boring some people, is the front sights. These front sights are not dovetailed like you get in many of the modern versions either. So if you don't like that front sight, well, you're kind of SOL. Yeah, so take a look at that. It's milled into that front part of that slide. So that's how some of these guns are different than the new ones that are made today. But let's talk about the things that I like and don't like. So let's start off with the obvious. It's a SIG. Man, SIG pistols going back for decades are known for reliability, durability, and craftsmanship. I mean, the Swiss just make amazing firearms all the way up until today with B&T. Now this particular gun was made in Germany, and we all know the Germans make great stuff too, so it just has that provenance. It's also a gun that has a military history, and you guys know I absolutely love that. And something else that the Swiss really do well when it comes to their firearms is think about the ergonomics. For a single stack 45, it feels really good in my hands. So I got larger hands, and it just feels really good. Just the size, the dimensions, the balance, and the weight of it, it just feels really nice. And something small that probably some people are not going to like, but I do like when it comes to guns, is a 2-dot system with the sights. So as you see in the back, we have just a notch with a white dot, and in the front you just have a standard dot right there. I actually like the 2-dot system more than the 3-dot system. I just find it to be a little bit easier for my eyes to see. But now let's talk about a couple of the things that I don't like. Well, I really should start off with some things that I'm going to call neutral, because it's not that they designed the gun wrong, it's just based off being a modern shooter that we would just like to have some features. Number one, it does have the heel release. This makes dropping this magazine kind of slow. And in modern shooting technique, especially for competitions, this is a lot slower than your standard button release. And also, this is a single stack 45. So you lose a lot of capacity compared to modern handguns. Now, this is something that SIG tried to remedy with the P227, which was a double stack version of essentially the 220, and unfortunately it wasn't a big seller. I've reviewed a couple here on the channel, and I thought they were fantastic. So hopefully they'll bring those back into production at some point again in the future. So now let's talk about the things that I really don't like. And the first thing I really don't like, believe it or not, on this is the trigger. Now, modern SIGs have fantastic triggers with the SRT trigger, and even the non-SRT triggers are pretty good. Now, granted, this is a 40-year-old pistol, so I can't be expecting too much, but I find that this trigger is a little bit on the gritty side. The take-up's kind of long. The wall is pretty good, so you can stage that trigger. It's just a little bit on the mushy side, and the reset, kind of long, and then you have more take-up. So it's not as nice and crisp as the modern SRT triggers, and in double action, it's real gritty. I don't know if that's going to come across on the camera. Maybe I'll hold it here to the microphone. Maybe you can hear some of that. I don't know. It's just real gritty. It's just the nature of these triggers. And of course, this was one of the early pistols, plus it's 40 years old. Another thing in general I don't like about the P-Series pistols is the high bore axis. A lot of people complain about that. So even if you have a very high grip on this pistol, that slide and barrel is riding pretty high. That tends to flip the gun a little bit more than other competitors like with Glock or HK. It's just part of the design. It's something that you can get used to. I just like my bore axes to be a little bit lower. And one more thing that I think is worth mentioning, and I'm not really sure how they change this over time, it's the decocker. So if I show you my more modern 220 here, and let me go ahead and safety check that. As we can see, we are empty. I'm going to lower the hammer here. I'm going to push down the decocker, and if I hold the decocker down, I can actually slowly release the hammer, as you can see. And I'll do that again. So I'll push that decocker down, and I can slowly release the hammer. However, when it comes to the older SIGs, you can't do that. That decocker just drops it. I can't really slow it down. It goes a long way, as you see. And that's something that I don't like. It's kind of loud. I really like having that slow release of the trigger if that's the way that you want to decock it, or slow release of the hammer. It's a little bit quieter. So I think from a tactical standpoint, it's a little bit nicer, having a silent decocker versus one that's a little bit loud. All right, so I know I have talked a whole bunch here about this gun, giving you a lot of history. You guys want to see some shooting. So I'm going to set up the target at 7 yards like I always do. I'm going to put 2 magazines through this because the capacity is a little bit limited, and I am really excited to get to shoot one of these. As I said, I don't shoot my personal 2 examples because they are unfired and kind of historically interesting for me. So this is going to be really fun to get to shoot a gun like this. So once again, 7 yards, 2 magazines, just to make sure this thing functions, see how accurate it is, and how well it shoots. And man, does this gun feel good to shoot. I think it's those full rails that go along the whole frame. It just rides on ball bearings. Now, this one doesn't have as smooth of an action like a lot of modern SIGs do, but it's still really, really nice. Just a great shooting gun. It does have a little bit more muzzle flip than I would like, but of course that just comes along with every SIG pistol because of that high bore axis. And I do have to say, the trigger isn't too bad now that I'm getting behind it. It feels pretty darn good, and I really like how I can stage the trigger with that wall. So it's not the greatest trigger in the world, but it's definitely not the worst. All right, so now I'm going to double the distance, see what happens to this group. I'm going to go for the head on this IDPA target, and hopefully I can continue to shoot it just as accurate. And I'm pretty happy with that group. No, it's not the tightest group that I've ever shot, but I am hitting the head on this target at 15 yards. The one thing though that you have to get used to with this muzzle flip or the higher bore axis, it does take you just a little bit longer to get your sights right back on target. But the gun is shooting great. It feels wonderful in my hand, and it is such a great shooting 45. All right, so the next test I'm going to do is the double action pull test. I've already kind of complained about the double action pull here on the bench. So this trigger is just a little bit heavy, a little bit gritty. Yeah, I don't know how this is going to translate into shooting, because you guys know these are double action, single action pistols. They're designed to be carried with the hammer down, where that first shot is going to be double action, then everything else single action. But I want to see what happens if I do a whole magazine double action. So I will use the decocker after every shot and just see if I can continue to shoot this thing accurate. I don't know with this mushy trigger and this gritty trigger if I'm going to do okay, but let's see how I do. And even though that trigger is heavy and gritty, I'm pretty happy with that group shooting at double action. Now, normally when I shoot these SIG P-Series pistols, I actually shoot them better double action than I do single action, but I've never shot one this old before. There's definitely a trigger design change between this era and the modern era. It's definitely shootable. I do like it, but the modern ones definitely have a little bit of an edge. All right, the next thing I'm going to do, as always, is the quick magazine change. Well, on this one, I'm put that in air quotes, quick magazine change, because getting this out and dropping it with the heel release is definitely a lot slower. I know that when people think about shooting a pistol like this, they like the military history and the provenance, and the Europeans always have approached this a little bit different. But I know with modern pistol technique, we like to drop that magazine, and here in the United States, we like those magazines to drop out of there as fast as possible, get that gun back in action. I know that when it comes to competition shooting, people are always trying to shave off milliseconds. Well, this is definitely going to be a lot slower. So I'm just curious how fast I can shoot this gun, and with this heel release, is it really practical to exchange that magazine out fast? And this gun was definitely not designed for modern competition shooting. Getting this magazine out is really slow, but it's definitely doable. I was pretty happy with the time, but I will tell you something, I guess it's just muscle memory because I'm so used to doing this test. But as soon as I emptied the first magazine, I instinctively tried to push an imaginary button here to drop that magazine. It is just muscle memory. And it's why training with the gun that you carry and use the most is so important. Even though I knew I had to use the heel release, I instinctively went, huh. And of course, nothing happened. So just a little bit of a muscle memory thing and something important to mention. All right, so the next test I'm going to do is the resting on a barrier or the bench resting test. Now, everybody says these guns are exceptionally accurate. So I'm going to try to max out the distance of the target here at the range. I'm going to bench rest this and just see what happens to this group. Now, I don't know if I'm going to be able to shoot it really tight, but hopefully I'll get all of the rounds on target in that center circle. So let's see how I do bench resting this gun or shooting it up against a barrier.
So on those irons, grab this there with
And once again, it's not as tight of a group as I was hoping, but everything hit center mast in that center circle. So as far as I'm concerned, it's a win. And from a practical standpoint, it definitely works and is accurate. All right. Now I want to give my wife Becky a chance to shoot this before I give you guys my final thoughts. She's not really a fan of 45 caliber handguns. Now this one does have a little bit of a high bore axis, as I mentioned, so it's going to flip on her. So she's probably not going to like it, but I always want to get her thoughts and opinions. So let me load up another magazine, give her a chance to shoot this, see what she has to say, and then I'll give you guys my final thoughts.
That one too, number one, fine. I think we're about to leave in a room. Oh, yeah.
And to my surprise, she really liked it. She actually liked these factory grips. Normally she is very grip sensitive, and the size of the grip she felt was really good for her smaller hands. So ergonomically, she really liked it. The only thing she said she didn't like was that it flipped just a little bit with that higher bore axis, and that was it. But she really liked it. She didn't shoot it as good as she was hoping, but overall she says that's a really nice pistol. And you can really tell that just because it is that SIG quality, that old West German quality. You hold this and realize this is one well-built firearm. So what are my final thoughts on the SIG P220 West German made stamped sheet metal P220? Well, this gun is so cool. It definitely has that old SIG heritage. I love the fact it's stamped made in West Germany. It's just a cool gun. Does it shoot better than modern SIGs? I'll be very honest with you, no. I know a lot of people will say they do. The collectors will want these, and I totally get that. I would want one of these as a collector. But when it comes to the actual practical application of shooting a gun like this, I'll take a modern one anytime. With the modern SRT trigger, that bar stock slide, and one of the advantages of the modern slides versus these breech blocks are supposed to be replaced every few thousand rounds, and now that these guns have been out of production for so long, I don't know where you would even find one. I'm sure you can find one, and who knows, maybe someone makes them in aftermarket, but they are supposed to be replaced every few thousand rounds. I'm not really sure what the actual number is, but you are supposed to do that. So there is kind of a lifetime on each one of those, and you have to be careful about that. I don't know what the problems could occur if you don't do that, but that is just what I have read from numerous sources. So having the modern ones just are a little bit nicer. They're going to have more longevity. They're a little bit more durable, and the triggers are definitely a lot nicer. But this is definitely an awesome pistol with military and police heritage. It is old. It shoots great. It is just really, really cool and really neat to have here on the table. And I really enjoyed shooting it. Yeah, old guns always tell a story, and this one definitely does. So what a cool gun. I think for me, the cool factor on this one is 5 out of 5 stars. The gun doesn't get 5 out of 5 stars, but from a collectability and a cool factor, it gets 5 out of 5 stars. It's just an awesome gun. But overall, on my star system, how would the P220 early production heel release stamped sheet metal slide P220 get? I have to give this thing 4 out of 5 stars. The trigger is meh. The heel release, while it is cool, it slows you down, and getting magazines for these are kind of hard. I can tell you I'm jealous of Jack, because when he bought this, it came with 3 magazines. I unfortunately only have 1 magazine for my heel release P220. So these magazines are really hard to come by because they haven't made magazines for this gun, I think, since the early 80s. So they're just hard to come by. But yeah, that's a downside. The gun feels great. It shoots pretty accurate, but it has that high bore action. So 4 out of 5 stars for the SIG Sauer P220 early production chambered in 45. Yeah, so thanks again, Jack, for giving me the opportunity to shoot this, because I guess as a nerdy and stupid collector, I don't shoot my personal 2 examples. So I got to shoot yours. So what do you guys think? Do you guys have any of the older SIGs or the stamped sheet metal SIG pistols? I would love to find an old 226 or old 228 made this same way. So let me know what you think in the comment section below. And as always, thanks for watching.